It's live, so I think okay, we're live now. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, welcome to our second iteration of Hasan Meets, HASAN.VC podcast, where I am your host, Umar Munshi, managing partner of HASAN.VC. And in these short sessions, we will be speaking to, learning from, and grilling founders. And today we have Brother Abdulla Sheikh, all the way from Saudi Arabia, joining us. Salam, Abdullah. How are you?
Walaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, I'm well. How are you, Umar?
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And
Pleasure.
before we get to know you a little better and dive into your business journey and understand about Build Now, uh, I'd like to share with everyone what we do here at HASAN.VC very briefly. HASAN.VC is a new VC, relatively new. We've actually been investing in startups and supporting startups for many years as an angel group. And recently we have evolved into a VC. What we have is a venture capital fund and an accelerator program uh, focused on two regions in Southeast Asia and the GCC. In Southeast Asia, our core market is Indonesia and Malaysia. And in the GCC, Saudi is definitely one of the key markets for us. So I'm very extra excited today to speak to Brother Abdullah Sheikh because he's in Saudi. He's been in Saudi, he grew up in Saudi, he's doing business in Saudi. And Alhamdulillah, I also understand that the business is doing well, receiving some good investment recently. Let's start off by getting to know you a little, Abdullah. If you could just share a little bit about yourself, your journey, your background for our audience.
Certainly. My name is Abdullah. I was born in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. I grew up here, did my schooling here, and then I went out to do my further studies in the UK and in the US, and then came back and joined the family business. So my family, my father specifically, has been in construction in Saudi Arabia for more than 40 years. So construction, as I say, runs in my blood. It's very normal to go to a construction site and talk to people there, how they work, technicians, laborers, and engineers. So I came back after my studies. So I graduated in civil engineering, which was my bachelor's from Cardiff University, and then I did my master's from Imperial College in London, and then I did some research at MIT in the US. And then thereafter, I came back. Though my study was more so on the environmental side, I did come back and join the family business, which was core construction. Then I was sort of more so focused on the environmental element of that, which was water treatment, wastewater treatment, desalination, which is quite a big part in Saudi Arabia as well. In addition to the general construction business, be it housing, hospitals, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So I came back. I joined my father, worked with him for 9 years or so. Firstly in construction, and then also we have manufacturing. So I also worked within the manufacturing business, where I led a couple of the initiatives, started factories, build the team, and so on and so forth. And I think one thing that I got advantage of, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity, is when you're in a family business, you really get to be an engineer, so you can be on the site and learn the stuff that engineers learn, probably a little bit less intense compared to a regular engineer, but you learn a lot of the other stuff. So I learned business because of being in that environment, because of being close to my father, seeing what happens on the ground on the side, but also on a higher level what happens in boardrooms, and how to think long term, how to look at the opportunities, how to assess them, the commercial aspect of that, not just the technical aspect. And I think that gave me incredible exposure towards business overall.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to touch on or go deeper into. I mean, the different types of entrepreneurs with different backgrounds, right? My own background, my family, we are all educators, teachers, lecturers, tutors, right? So, sort of on their own, but not really entrepreneurs, right? Not really business people. So I sort of went a different direction. From your background, as you pointed out, you had the benefit of being inside the business and seeing things as somebody who's part of the family running the business. Uh, you also studied in top universities in the West, right? Um, so, could you share how, in more detail, right, how being part of a business family helped you? At what level? Is it mindset? Is it exposure? Is it specific, culture of doing business? And separately, also, was your education really valuable? Because now you're an entrepreneur, right? Whatever you studied, although I think it's a little bit relevant, rather relevant probably in this case. But yeah, is it very useful as an entrepreneur that you went through that education as well?
So I think it's a very, very good question. And but now being 10, 11 years in business and having gone through that early career stage and before that the education stage, I'm much better placed, and I see a lot of other people in my in similar shoes, or people who are going through the education system now, and they ask me this question as well. So I think my perspective has, looking back, is a little bit different than what it was being when I was in education itself, but I think it's still close. So when being very candid, in Saudi Arabia when I was there, I was in an international school. It wasn't the most competitive. I'm Indian originally, and if you know anything about India, they're very, very competitive. So it wasn't nowhere nearly as competitive compared to what international standards are, or in general Indian families how they are. But when I went to university, so I did well in my school. But when I went to Cardiff University, for example, which was a top tier university, I could feel that my level was nowhere near that of the students that were there. So everybody had, 3 A stars, 2 A stars, 1 A, and I had 2 Bs and A. So it was not a very, amazing grades that I had. So I actually felt that, I had one of the lowest grades, probably the lowest grades among the cohort, but I got in. For whatever reason, I got in. But I think what that helped me do is it really helped me level up my game, because I had never seen that caliber of kids and top level of kids coming in from all around the world, and getting exposure to that, how they think, how they work, sitting with them. You become like the people who you sit around with. So that really helped me. I struggled a lot. I think the first year was quite tough. I think second, third year, then I had to come up. I had to work that hard. Then I came up, and then from there on, I went to Imperial College, which was another, it was the number one in the world for engineering at that time, which was another step up. And then from Cardiff to Imperial again was a huge step. I went there, and I thought, I was amazing at Cardiff, but now in Imperial, I was just one of the many. The people from all around the world again. And similarly, when I went to MIT, which is similar as well. So I think what that helped me do was, up my game every time. So it gave me the right cohort, the right set of people to hang around with, to sit around with, to learn from, to see their work ethic, and it helped me really push. So when I went out for my education, for me, I used to say this to my colleagues as well. The reason is not, most people when they go out to get a degree, it's to get a job. So for me, it was not about getting a job. I mean, yeah, that is the good plan B. Having a degree could land you a job. But for me, it was I really wanted to come back in Saudi Arabia itself, and be part of the family business. And primarily, I wanted to help my family. So I wanted to be part of my father's business and help him, support him in whatever he does. So I had that from very early on. I knew that, so I was there to learn, and I think that really helped me. So I never learned to get a degree to just to pass, and that's why I think I pushed harder to learn for the sake of learning, understanding, knowledge, and so on and so forth. And that's why it helped me just upgrade myself every time, and try to be top of class, and then go from there on, next challenge, and so on and so forth. So I think that was quite different. My perspective on education was quite different from that angle, and that helped me achieve much more than I think I would have done otherwise.
All right. And before we go into coming from a family that does business, um, if you could pinpoint, because I mean, a lot of us do not have that opportunity to go to a top tier university to meet incredible talents from around the world. Some the opportunity just was not there, or we didn't cut it in that sense, right? For myself, I went to university in Singapore for a year, and I started tasting business and doing stuff outside, and I could not study anymore. Um, Can you pinpoint, if you could, try to pinpoint what exactly did you learn from these people? Is it hard work? Is it a certain kind of mindset? What if you could share two or three, points for all of us?
So I think I'll give you a very, very specific example for university kids itself. So I think the difference was when I was in Cardiff compared to Imperial. Those are two almost different class of universities. In Cardiff, kids used to study. I don't know, let's say in the morning, and then in the evening spend 3 hours playing FIFA. In Imperial, we used to spend 1 hour playing FIFA. So that was the real difference. That it's not like we didn't do good stuff. It's not like the kids weren't having fun or weren't enjoying. We just spent less time on wasteful stuff, and just having the most impact stuff. Do the highest impact stuff. So when you're studying, you're really focused and you're really studying hard. The whole group is together and they're pushing each other, asking tough questions, helping each other. When we are outside doing sports, we're just doing sports like everybody else, but then we know when to stop. And this was the biggest difference that I saw between the different caliber of people, that they do everything. It's not like they are nerds or geek or everybody just studies 24 hours. They do multiple activities. Funnily enough, what I saw in Imperial was Imperial had the most number of societies and extracurricular curricular activity clubs in the UK. And it was supposed to be one of the geekiest university and nerdy university as well from an outsider perspective. So people were studying hard, but they were also
Mhm.
playing hard as well in that sense. So I think that time management was a skill that I saw there,
Yes.
which people really brought up, and they showed me further. They were excelling in studies and excelling in whatever else they chose to do, be it tennis, be it chess, be it debating. I think
All
one
right.
other
All
thing
right.
that I saw was perseverance. I think another
Yes.
example that I can give is they really wanted to get it done and they really wanted to do better, to do more. So they really put in those hours. It's getting, you get fed up after studying for so many hours, or if you are not achieving what you want to achieve. But just going through that iteration after iteration, trying harder. I think this was something that I saw, or in general, I am seeing as well, even now, between successful people and unsuccessful people, is the perseverance. If they want to do it, they just get to it and get it done, whatever it takes.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much. So back to the fundamentals, making best use of your time, optimizing time, pushing yourself. Although there's a need to have fun and so on, but less so of that and more so of stuff that will actually make a difference in your performance, right? And perseverance. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, this is a quick one, cognizant of time, because we also want to dive into the business side of things, what you're doing, business in Saudi, and so on. Um, how about the aspect of being part of a business family, coming from a business background? Is it significant for you in assisting you or guiding you in your journey?
So I do think yes, it helps a lot, and I think the example I gave was from the well early on being a site engineer, I still had access to the boardroom. So I was still sitting on dining table, and my father is talking about very high level stuff, which I'm very far away from, or I'm in generally any site engineer is very far away from. But I got insights into that very early on, and I think the exposure I got was incredible. So I was involved in business development, doing deals internationally on behalf of the family. But then I was also on the ground, drawing drawings and checking the specifications and taking off quantity out of a bill of quantity. So this was something that I had to do, and I think that those two things gave me an exposure, gave me an understanding of business that is not usual, and it's not easy to get either. And I think one
Yes.
caveat to that is what I see now as in a startup for people who are joining us is the exposure that you can get in a family business. It's very close to what you can get in a startup as well, because in a startup as well is very chaotic, and you are expected to do more, take more.
Yes.
We are doing too many things, going too fast. So I think that is something that I see that for young people especially, they should really focus on exposure, regardless of being a family business or not. And I was lucky, but there are other opportunities as well similar, which I think exposure really helps you think differently, understand businesses differently, understand how to manage people. It's not just about delivering your own thing. You really have to leverage others, teams, and so on and so forth.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I echo your sentiment. young people should go work in startups, right? Whether it's internship or whether it's your first job, working in a big corporate may look good on your resume, but in terms of the level of exposure, the level of personal development, I think it's very, very different. Yeah, in Ethis, along the way, along the years, we've had many very good interns. Until today, we still have internships. I believe for you also probably you also have internships for your startup. So yeah, for the young people watching this, go work for startups. Right, that's the best way to learn and develop yourself. Right. Brother, so going to your company, will you tell us a little bit, a brief overview of what you do and how is it going?
Sure. So my company is called Build Now, and I think the easiest way to explain from a consumer perspective is we are buy now, pay later for construction materials, but we only serve businesses, so we are B2B. So how it really works is if you are, let's say, a manufacturer, and you need to buy raw materials, but you don't have cash to pay up for those raw materials upfront, we buy them for you and we give it to you, and you can pay us back in a certain time duration. So usually, which is up to 6 months. So typically, it's almost like sort of working capital financing. So once you get this material, you can within 6 months you can very easily turn it around. You can manufacture the product, you can sell it, you can invoice it, get paid, and then pay us back. So that's what we do.
All right, brilliant. And how's it going so far? Yeah, I believe you're 2 years old, so not fresh and new, but not yet, in the later stages.
So we started 2 years ago exactly in Ramadan. It was
Ah,
actually just around this date.
happy
Um,
anniversary. Right.
yeah, thank you so much. Alhamdulillah, so we started with three people. It was me. I had two other co-founders, Hisham and Rahat. Now, Alhamdulillah, we are almost 35 people. We have two offices, one here, one in Bangladesh, and we have other people also working from the US, from the UK, other places in the world as well. Business is active. We have served more than 250 SMEs, enabled businesses within them for themselves or between them. And alhamdulillah, we're active and running and trying to have a bigger impact in this market and then hopefully internationally as well.
All right. So to understand exactly what you do, an SME, a company involved in construction, they need some material to do their job, to do their work order or whatever contract that they have, and you help them to pay for it first or buy it first, so that they can do the job, and they pay you back in installments over time, right?
Not quite. So let me explain with what exactly the problem is. Usually, I think
Sure.
you have some idea. I think for the audience as well. So in construction, let's take a typical example of a contractor. Cash cycles are very bad. So construction, firstly, is very volatile. There's a lot of variables to play with. So you have to start. Usually you get paid on milestones. So once you do the foundation, you can bill it, and then you get paid. But there's a lot of things that happens in between. So there is specification, approval, consultant has to check everything. You might have done work for 10 million worth, but maybe there's a small error which takes 10 riyals to fix. You can still get stuck. The whole bill could be stuck because of that, and that might take you 2 3 days to redo and then rebill and then reassess and then get paid. So you have these very random events happening which affect your payment cycle. Even though your payment is going to come, you're sure. I mean, it's a very minor matter, but you need to run. To run, you need cash because you need to pay salaries, you need to buy materials to go to the next stage. And if you waste 2 weeks, 3 weeks just doing this extra paperwork and your manpower is sitting idle, you're going to end up running into a loss. So what we do, for example, such as this, so we work with contractors who are already working, have a project ongoing, but for them to avoid this or mitigate this issue of cash flow, what we do is we come in and we help them on the material part. So material is the biggest expense in any construction project. Around 60 70% of any project is material. So to buy this, usually they have to pay cash upfront, especially if they are an SME contractor, because manufacturers don't give them credit. They don't have volumes to entice them with the right terms and so on and so forth. To buy this cash, they don't have any. They're waiting for their bill. Their manpower is sitting ideal. So we come in. We have developed our solution, in a typical fintech style. So as everything is online, very quick, everything is digital. So we can very quickly enable them to get to any materials they want from whatever supplier they choose. immediately. So we pay the supplier, he delivers the material onto the site, and then they pay us back when they get paid. So usually we study the project cycle, so we know if you get the material today, you can turn it around in 2 months and get paid at least by 3 months. So we'll tell you, listen, pay us back after 4 months, but we charge a small profit on the material that we resell you. So we sell it with a markup, which is pre-agreed and known between both the parties.
Okay, brilliant. From what I can tell, you seem to be in the right place at the right time. Saudi is booming, VC is booming, real estate construction is booming. Buy now pay later is still hot in Saudi. I know there's a few unicorns, if I'm not wrong, in the buy now pay later space. Help us understand this term buy now pay later, because typically it is in consumers, right? It's for consumers. You want to buy. I want to buy a phone, and at the point of checkout, there's an embedded buy now pay later service provider. They will buy it for me, and then I pay them. Is it very different, your space of B2B buy now pay later, and specifically in this case construction?
So I think it is quite different. It sounds the same. I mean, we use the same terminology definitely because it sticks. Buy now, pay later. People like it. People understand it. But I think, firstly, our ticket sizes are quite big. So a typical buy now pay later on the consumer side is a mobile phone worth 2,000, 3,000 reals. So it's very small tickets, and the volume is much higher compared to us. And I think what is good on the consumer side as well, at least in the Saudi market, is the digitalization is much higher in some senses. So the embedded finance works much better. For us, for the construction sector, which is, I mean, globally one of the least digitized industries in the world, and then in Saudi Arabia is quite the same, probably, if a little bit worse than the average in the world. So people are not used to ordering stuff online. So what that makes, how that makes us different is, so most of our business happens offline. So the digitalization from our end, everything happens online. Everything is through portals and systems, and all our team works through through their laptops. But the customer doesn't work that way necessarily. No, neither does the supplier. So supplier has to be onboarded, and I think there are a lot of offline elements that happen in terms of onboarding the supplier, or convincing the supplier, or visiting the site and verifying what they are saying digitally, at least as a contractor, and then sort of bringing that all together on a portal for us to underwrite or take a decision if this client is worthy of credit or not. And I think the major difference that happens is because we're looking at big tickets, and the mix of the hybrid of offline versus online. I think the timeline is a little bit more. So typically, consumer side is in a matter of minutes they can get 2,000, 5,000 reals, whatever it might be. For us, we're looking at average ticket of 500,000 reals. So the timeline is much longer. So we're looking at usually 7 days. That's a week. And because the ticket sizes are big, we are a little bit more careful as well in that sense. So
Yeah.
we don't give it that quickly, that easily. We need a little bit more, much more of due diligence before we take that bet.
So, okay, I understand that. Definitely makes a lot of sense. Bigger ticket, that there's more physical interaction, engagement, and so on, given the sector that you're in. So, the BNPL is hot because it's scalable, right? I mean, once you sort of figure it out, right, it's a matter of getting the service out there, and of course having the money to back it up. Um, for in your case, would you consider your business as scalable?
So I think it's scalable in terms of volume in terms of revenue, in terms of GME, whatever you want to call it, because purely, if I close one contract, it's a huge contract, and I can close a lot of contracts. I mean, I think how we like to compare ourselves is, you can't compare us to consumer side, because they need a lot of numbers and pure numbers. They need a number of people to come in. We don't want people to come in. We want companies to come in, but each company buys a lot. And the beauty of our business is, or B2B in general, is that once you serve a contracting company or a company, a business, and they're specifically in that field, and if they're good, then they become recurring business, because they are also, usually people want to grow, they want to finish a project, grab another project, and they still need partners, they need services like us. So it's a continuous business as well. So you need to keep adding. Obviously, there is some that you stop with for X reason, or they stop with you, and you need
Yes.
to sort of refill it. But you can add in that sense quite easily. And I
Yeah.
think purely because, as you mentioned, construction, the pipeline for construction in Saudi Arabia is estimated to be $2.1 trillion in the
Yes.
next 6 to 7 years. So I
Yes.
think that is just too big. The market is just way too big. So if we hope we capture, a few decimal points of that market, that's going to be a very big number by itself. So I think it
Yes.
is still scalable. I think the digitalization element of that is still coming in, but I think the idea is to be on the forefront of that digitalization. So whatever happens. We are at the forefront of capturing those opportunities, which we are doing now. There's a lot of things happening in the tech space from the government side. The APIs coming in, making it much easier to pull documents, to pull information on an applicant, which we're doing continuously. Open banking is coming in. We're already
Yes.
preparing the infrastructure for that. So I think being on the front line of that and being ready, being hopefully the fastest within this sector, within the B2B sector, within the buy now pay later for construction sector, is what is will give you scale and what will give you the opportunity.
Yes. Are you a first mover in this space in Saudi?
Yeah, so we think we are the first mover. We don't know anybody who's doing particularly what we do, or in the niche that we do. There are other people who are doing in other sectors, but not in construction.
All right. And so how do you come up with this idea or this opportunity? Was it a problem you saw that needed to be solved, or do you maybe see it happening in another market and you're like, oh, this is something that can work in Saudi?
So I think so while I was in my family business and doing construction and doing manufacturing, I naturally wanted to do startups. I've been doing startups for quite a while. You don't see all of them on my LinkedIn profile, but most of them are failed startups, and that's probably why. So I always had this urge, to see a problem and sort of, see how we can solve it, and if you can make something out of it, something very impactful, and so on and so forth. When I was in the construction business and in the manufacturing business, on both sides of the table, one thing that I saw was a problem was buying materials, finding materials was not very tough, especially if you are in the industry. You sort of have the connections, you sort of develop that, after a few months, few years of working. But the problem was that what was limiting this trade between a supplier and a buyer was the ability of credit, ability
Yeah.
of providing credit. So usually, even till today, majority of the trade credit that happens is given by manufacturers and suppliers of goods, but they are not designed to give credit. I mean, they're not supposed to be giving credit. A
Yeah.
manufacturer's job is to manufacture the highest quality of product, fastest, more efficiently, most efficiently, not to understand risk or do collections or any of these things. But this was much more prevalent in Saudi market compared to the Indian market, for example, which I'm a little bit more aware of, or the UK market.
Oh, so like
So this was
in-house
a huge gap.
financing. Yes. Yeah. So like in-house
Yeah, so
financing, they
this
were
is
big.
not usual. So, how we used to do business, I mean, to tell you something very anecdotal, is we our salespeople used to go and sell, and if it's a big contract, the contractor says, "Listen, I can't pay upfront cash because that's how my cash cycle works. So I need credit, but I'll give you a
Yeah.
huge order of a million or whatever it might be, and I can give you a higher price as well. Don't give me a cash price. Give me a higher price, and I'll essentially cover the cost of financing in some senses. But I need credit.
Yeah.
But for me as a supplier, I'm not a banker. I'm not buy now pay later company. I have limited money in my pocket, and that's also rotating. I have many opportunities, so I can say, listen, I can give you 15 days credit, but not more than that. And this guy is asking for 2 months credit. So it's just a matter of aligning terms, because the product can be made, can be sold logistically, time wise, quality wise. The customer is ready to buy, is ready to pay a little bit extra for credit terms as well. But nobody's filling this gap. So I saw this on both sides of the table. I said, there's a huge gap, especially on bigger tickets. So why don't we come in and we sit down as a syndicate, syndicating that supplier is ready, buyer is ready, both are happy to cover the cost of financing to a certain extent. We come in between and we enable that trade. So that was the idea. That's how it started.
All right. Brilliant. Brilliant. And I can see how you're solving that problem. It seems to be a very clear, practical solution. Uh, but I guess the challenge, typically for a first mover would also be funding, right? So maybe we can jump to the topic of funding, which is always what a lot of startup founders like to know about. And before that, I just want to share also for Hassan how where we come in, right? Based on what I know of your business and what you've shared with us, you're beyond the stage that we typically look at. We have been investing in those, maybe 2 years ago potentially when you first started. That's where Hassan comes in, right? Because we come in a very early stage. You are the first mover, and you're breaking through a lot of barriers, right? Eventually, there'll be others coming up, and as you pointed out, the market is big enough for potentially many players. So that's where Hassan is going to look for those who want to follow in your footsteps in that sense, or who want to enter the space that you pioneered in Saudi. And for us, we're not a huge capital VC because our funds come from our angel group, right? So we democratize access to VC investment by allowing our angel investors to come in with smaller tickets, and that's where we have a VC fund. Now, unfortunately, it's not 2 years ago, and I only got to know you now, so I don't think we'll be we'll be talking about potentially exploring any investment in your company if you were raising, because you're already ahead of that stage. Tell us about your early stage, right? Where we are trying to come in because we see that it's difficult for very early stage companies to get funds. How did you start off? How do you sustain in the first 1 year? Was it your own funds? Did you raise funds from others, or were you just very lean? Like, how do you navigate the commercial aspect in your early days? Yeah, can you hear
So I
me?
think for us it was a little bit different because at the end of the day, it's a very yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Right.
So I think for us it was a little bit different, compared to a typical SaaS business or any other business. We are quite a capital heavy business. So we didn't believe. I mean, how can you give credit if you don't have money yourself? So we needed capital even to start. So we couldn't have it started without capital. So what happened was for us, we had commitments and we raised sort of a pre-seed round before we actually started. I think 3 months before we actually started. Once the team was together, and I think one thing that is most key at that stage, at early stage, it's all in the air. It's all theory. It's all ideas, and it might sound amazing, but it has nothing. I mean, the reality is very far from it. So we built a good team. Rahat and Hisham, me. We had expertise from banking, from construction, from fintech, and I think on the basis of that, we were able to convince some family and friends and some angels to commit some money with us. So we raised the pre-seed round. Now with that pre-seed round, then we were able to start. We developed product. We sort of had a lot of things ready on paper. Where we needed capital, that's where we needed capital, but everything else was sort of ready. So I mean, I had customer lists ready. I had talked to a few people already. I had suppliers, onboarded, so to say, all manually. So I think one thing we did, which I think that's how it should be done, is we really said, business comes first, everything else comes second. So business should work. It doesn't have to work perfectly. You don't have to have the best solution, the most shiny tech or whatever else, but it should be moving, because only then you really test and see what actually the customer is asking for and not what you think is to be built. So we had some funding early on from family, friends, and angels. We used that to start our first MVP and then go on from there on.
All right, brilliant. So as you scale up, right? Because I mean, I understand you got some funding and that helped you to progress. As you scale up, you'll need more and more funds because that is the nature of your business, right? You are financing purchases. So how do you how do you plan that, right? Because is it projected based on your business? And we know, I mean, all of us know, we always have positive projections, right? But in reality, things get challenging sometimes, right? It goes up and down. Sometimes you go faster than your projection. And getting funds in, there's always a cost, an opportunity cost, whether it's equity or some other cost. So how do you look at this component? Let's say someone a year ago, right, before you got your recent funding, which we will talk about in a short while. How do you project how much money you'll need, or do you look at it on a very short term basis? You raise funds in small rounds or small cycles. Yeah, how do you do it?
Sure. Omar, just to repeat, you were breaking off. So the question is, how do we project how much capital do we need to get to the next milestone? This is the question,
Yes.
right?
Do you break it up into smaller parts, or do you raise a large amount for a certain period of time?
So I think how we saw it, if for in our business, if you raise equity, there'll be nothing left for the founders because of the nature of the business. You need a lot of capital, but obviously nobody's going to give you debt early on, and debt really works on track record. It works on history. So when we started, we raised equity, plus our shareholders, our investors had a very clear understanding, or we were able to convince them that it's a debt business, so you need to commit debt alongside with equity. So we had almost equivalent debt coming in alongside equity, which really helped us try out, build the product, and test out the market and see if there is demand. So we had a target that we can do a certain amount with this funding. Obviously, at the start, it's mainly built on assumptions and the experience that we had as founders. So because I was from construction industry, I had some sense of the numbers or what could be achieved or number of customers acquired and so on and so forth to achieve the next milestone. So that's what we did. So we started there, we raised something, we convinced our initial investors to give us some debt. We worked very well with it. And then once you sort of start building that great history, doing number of deals, bringing in a good number of customers, the more you do that, the easier it becomes to go and convince others. And I think from there on, the next projection is to get to the initial years. So for us, we did whatever we did in the first year. So the second year, it should be ambitious. If you're a startup, at least if you want to create impact, it should be based on that. So we did X. Next year, we're targeting to do 5X, and this is how we aim to do it, and this is what we need to do it. So that's how sort of how we planned.
All right.
We
Thanks.
did,
That's very clear.
obviously look at other examples, try to look at other
Yes.
examples from other countries who can sort of help us, think of what we can achieve in the long term.
All right. And I'm aware you got a recent Series A, or was it a seed round recently?
Seed round. Yeah,
Seed round. Okay. So
we got a
congratulations on
seed
that.
round.
Yes. How was that process? Was it smooth, or do you have to go through many rejections? Or yeah, just share a little bit on that component.
Sure. So I think fundraising is quite tough in generally. And I think all the founders listening, people who have done it before, people who are much more mature than us, they can probably tell us much more about it. So for us as well, it really comes down to execution. Uh, Fundraising from a VC is no different than fundraising from anybody else. Money moves on trust. Money moves on belief. Money moves on confidence. So for us, what we did from day one itself, before we started, I was already in touch with the local VCs, and we sort of had aligned VCs that we thought were invest in within our field. So we had done our research. We thought could invest in the Saudi market. So we didn't go to international VCs because we know they will not invest in a new concept in a new market. So we did not focus on them. And then once we started raising, I think a seed round, an institutional round or price round, we in the pipeline itself to that we were talking to them at several different points. So when we started, we showed them the plan and said, this is what we're doing. Why don't you invest in our pre-seed? Blah blah blah. This is you're too early. Whatever. They didn't want to invest at that stage, but we showed them what we're trying to do and what we are aiming to do. And then 6 months later, I used to go back and I used to, catch up over a coffee, and then I used to show them the result. So, this is what I promised, and this is what we achieved. So, they could really see the execution coming in through. And this is what I did for the next 1.5 years or so before we actually started raising the money. So I actually reached out to more than 170 VCs locally and internationally. And funnily enough, the people who invested were the people who I sort of got to know the most, or they got to know me the most. They got to know the business the most. So the day when we were raising, when we opened the round, they sort of sort of knew pretty much 80% about the company already. They knew my character, they knew my founders. They had met us, they'd been to our office. We had, had coffee together, discussed, the potential and so on and so forth. And those were the two that actually ended up really, putting money in our company rather than the other 168 that we reached out to, cold reached out to, or were foreign, didn't understand Saudi Arabia. They did not invest.
Okay, brilliant, mashallah. We have some questions coming in, but I just want to say that your advice just now, what you did is brilliant. That's exactly what founders need to do, and you'll be surprised so many founders don't do it. Even I also sort of did it a little bit, but getting in touch is just the first step. Trying to pitch the first time is just the first step. It's about the relationship, and until today, we still get emails and updates from companies, and I appreciate it. I read those emails. Sometimes I'm like, oh, another email from this company. Let's see what's happening, right? And if you can show your execution in line with your plan, then I think investors will be lining up over time. Inshallah. All right. We have some questions, and we will be wrapping up pretty soon. So let's jump to the first one. Beyond construction, how about other industries? Do you want to expand to wholesale, trade, food, and whatnot?
So I think for us, construction is a huge industry. Manufacturing is a huge industry. And I think within this industry itself, we haven't explored enough. There are a number of commodities which we haven't even touched yet. So I think in the near future, we're just thinking of being within this industry. The market size is big enough, only in Saudi Arabia. But I think if the formula works and if we can scale it very well to a certain level where we are very confident and this business is working, in an automated fashion, so to say, everything is covered. I think that's when we will look at other industries as well. But in the near future, I think
All right, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, definitely, there's so much more room for you to grow within construction. How about when it comes to exits? You as a founder at this stage, I know you're very passionate about your business. Are you thinking of the future potential exit on behalf of the investor, or are you laser focused on just getting the business to work as best as possible?
yeah, Soman, you were breaking off, so I didn't quite get the question. Can
Yeah.
you repeat?
When it comes to exits, do you think of an exit at this stage? Because investors may want to know what's the exit plan, or do you think it's not necessary to do so and just focus on the business? The exit will come on its own.
I think as founders, I think, and this is the advice we get from much senior founders and our advisors as well. Is I think it's very good to know, and I think it's essential to know how VC money works, what they're looking for. It's very essential to know what will happen to you itself as a founder. The end game is something that you should understand, and you should understand how the mechanism is, what could happen. I think to be hyper focused on that is probably not wise because we are very far from our own plans of exit or anything of this sort. But we have a good understanding of it. We probably talk about it within our own founder team, maybe I don't know once a year, but nothing more than that. So the traditional route is IPO, acquisition, whatever it might be. But for us, our aim so far is a little bit more long term. So it's a little bit further away for us to start thinking about it more seriously.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Any plans for regional expansion? I think there are people in the region who would be interested to have built now in their country. Yeah.
So
Any
I'm going
plans
to
for
answer this
expansion?
question. You're breaking again. So yeah. So again, we think the market in Saudi Arabia is too big, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense for us. It's not. It won't be very wise either to go and try to figure out a new economy, new industry, new regulations. So we will be focusing on Saudi Arabia for quite a while.
All right. Yeah, it seems that my connection is not too good. Last question before we end, and then I'll just give you a few minutes to share whatever you feel will be valuable for our audience and budding entrepreneurs and even investors. Um, do you feel it's more important to focus on sustainability or growth?
So I think this is a
sustainability.
very good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. So what we did in our case is, we wanted to always have, positive unit economics. We don't do business where we pay people to buy from us. So from day one, we were unit economics profitable. We did not plan to be net profitable, but in the first year we were net profitable. In the second year, we were net profitable. So I think if you get the fundamentals right, that is something that can happen still, as it happened for us, while growing as well. So growing is important, but again, I think what is important to understand is what is the reason for growth. So is the reason for growth that it will be a duopoly or a monopoly, and you need to capture the market as soon as possible and be biggest stakeholder in the market, or do you think the market is big enough for 10 players? Then you don't really need to go crazy and just grow. You can be more sustainable because that is going to last much more longer. It depends case to case, but I don't think at this moment, to me logically it doesn't make sense to grow on any cost. Growth is good, especially if you are in this game, startup, VCs, or not. You are in it, and it should be very clear that you are looking to grow and create a big impact, and that's what we are looking for as well at Build Now, but not at the cost of profitability. So as long as profitability is there, we'll push, we'll grow, but while maintaining that.
All right. That's excellent. Beautiful answer. Um, Equality within economics, I think that's the main point that you highlighted earlier, right? And the fundamentally sound business model, because there are businesses that operate on a subsidized business model, with the idea that at some point they'll be able to charge more or have a lower cost and become profitable, but that point may not come. And I think those days are a little bit behind, right? All right, thank you so much. Alhamdulillah, we have reached the end of today's session. Any last words? Especially maybe let's talk about investors, right? For Hassan, we are an angel group with a VC, with an accelerator program. I know you've been involved in startups in the past, advising them, working with them, doing your own. Um, what's your view of angel investment? Would you encourage those who have spare cash to look at angel investment? Because the risks are definitely very high.
Yeah, so I think I have been burned personally as well on this front.
Yeah,
So I think it's important. I think it's good. Angel investing is good. It lets you, gives you exposure to this high growth sector of tech startups and whatnot. But I just think it should be done with measure. It should be a very small portion of your savings. I don't think you should get too excited, especially angel comes in at a very early stage of a startup. So things change drastically. It should be very well understood that majority of the investments will fail. So whatever pool
yeah,
of investment that you have for startups, it should be very well diversified, regardless of what you believe or which startup you see as will become the most promising startup. So I think it should be more organized, more managed. How VCs do it, so to say, they have a portfolio and they have concentration limits and all of these things. So I think if it's done with that measure, it's good. But a lot of people I see, even the local investors, they get a little bit too excited and they do stuff. They bet heavily on a few companies or a couple of companies, and that's what they get really affected. So then it's not good for the ecosystem, for their morale as well. So just I think going through angel groups like yourself, atheists who have experience and sort of diversifying it makes more sense than going directly.
I couldn't have done the pitch for Hassan better. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Abdullah. So yeah, it's been an amazing session talking to you, learning from you. Definitely, we'll keep in touch. And if you come to this part of the world, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, let me know. We'll meet up. I'll definitely be in Saudi soon, and we should catch up over coffee. Ramadan
Inshallah.
Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem to you and everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for your time. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Assalamualaikum.
So.